Friday the 13th Part 2 picks up 5 years after the previous film. We get a recap of the closing fight between Alice and Mrs. Voorhees. We see that the recap is a dream from Alice, who is still recovering from her experience at Camp Crystal Lake. She opens the fridge and sees the head of Pamela Voorhees and gets an ice pick into the skull. Roll opening credits. The film cuts to a trio of counselors on their way to Peckenack Lodge, but not before being warned by Ralph. The trio makes it to the lodge under the supervision of Paul. He's the head of a program to train counselors ahead of the upcoming camp season. The only rule that Paul lays out to them is to not go near Camp Crystal Lake. Enter Ginny, a counselor who is dating Paul. Despite being late, she has Paul wrapped around her finger, and not a surprise considering she has a degree in psychology. Before the summer camp prep would start the next day, Paul lets a few of the counselors join in on one last night on the town. Some stay behind as volunteers, while 2 are reprimanded for sneaking off the Camp Crystal Lake. While at a bar, Ginny is talking with Paul and Ted, the prankster of the group. Ginny starts to share her thoughts on Jason and the trauma the death of his mother would have caused him, all the while suggesting that Jason witnessed his mother's killing spree, and Mrs. Voorhees was not aware of her son's presence. Back at the camp, those who stayed behind are systematically being killed off. Scott gets his throat slit, the death of Terry is off screen, Vicky is stabbed with a kitchen knife, but there are 2 other deaths that stand out among those that are slaughtered at Peckenack. First, there is Mark's death, which I was unprepared for. The film builds him up. He has a bit of an arc. He's independent, he has a sympathetic backstory with his inability to walk due to a motorcycle accident. The arm wrestling shows he's physically capable of fighting for himself. When you think he eventually comes face to face with Jason, you would expect a drawn-out confrontation. Nope. Jason just cuts a machete into his face and he falls down a long set of stairs. It's shocking and shows that Jason is a truly merciless killer. Then we have the lovers, Jeff and Sandra, who are impaled with a spear while cuddling post-coitus. This is almost directly lifted off of Mario Bava's Bay of Blood, and big surprise, hashtag Bava did it better. And you know what? Hashtag Rambaldi did it better. In Friday the 13th Part 2, Jason drives the spear. We see the spear go through the bed and into the floor, and that's it. Quick and not dwelled upon. Yet in Bay of Blood, Bava holds the camera on the couple even after they're stabbed. We see the couple clutching to each other right up to the moment of their deaths. According to Part 2 screenwriters Ron Kurtz and Paul Scuderi, they had never seen Bay of Blood, nor were they aware of this specific kill having been done previously in Bava's film. Yeah, it sounds unbelievable, but at the time when film releases were not as wide-reaching as they are today, I'm actually willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Jason Voorhees in this film is an interesting study all his own. First, let's look at the attire. He's got the plaid shirt with overalls, he's wearing a burlap sack with a hole for his one probably good eye. Seeing this character, I was immediately reminded of the killer in the 1976 film The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
World War II had just ended. In Texarkana, Arkansas, boys had come home to their families. Husbands reunited with their wives. It was a happy, peaceful time. Until the Phantom Killer struck. For 4 months, he held an entire city in the icy grip of terror. The Town That Dreaded Sundown. A true story.
Let's be honest, this clothing is eerily based on Klansman imagery. Sure, it may not be the pointed hoods and the white robes. If you see photos of southern lynch mobs, they're wearing rural farming-related clothing. Even his weapon of choice, a pickaxe, recalls late 1800s imagery. But the kicker is that both Town That Dreaded Sundown and Friday the 13th Part 2 have no victims that are people of color. All the people murdered in the films are white. I think there is an intriguing observation to be held from that. The whole KKK and persona of racist hate is going to always be associated with white people, all to this very day. White people could do anything and everything to try to change the hearts and minds of others. But there will always be those reminders, both historic and from others who will constantly hold that notion over their heads. That ominous impression will forever haunt white people, much like Jason or the Phantom Killer haunted their respective communities. Jason here in this film is not an efficient killer. Sure, when he has the element of surprise, he can take anyone down without any resistance. But when he has to contend with Ginny, now he has a real fight on his hands. He's on the receiving end of an ambush kick to the groin, all while missing twice in a row when he attempts to ambush Ginny. Also, Jason is very much a human. He is aware of his need for self-preservation. When Ginny goes after him with a chainsaw, we can see Jason is actually scared. Under the burlap mask, you can see the one hole for his eye. His eye is wide open, terrified of this woman who is bringing the fight to him. Part 2 continues the trend of bucking the common criticism of Friday the 13th being a misogynist franchise. We had Alice in the first film, we have Ginny in this film. Not only is she physically capable of handling herself, but her analysis of Jason's situation allows her to mentally outdo Jason. She puts on Pamela's sweater and is able to almost psych out Jason. Funny how a decades-old horror series does more justice for women than most big-budget franchises and gender-swap reboots that we see in the contemporary cinema climate. The film is a big step forward for the series. The previous film was littered with issues, from continuity to geographical inconsistencies of the killer to iffy makeup appliances. Steve Miller is the director of Part 2, but he was also a production assistant on the first film. Clearly, he was taking notes while working on the first film under Sean Cunningham. Other than a few questionable uses of POV, the constant sense of tension adds much to the film, thanks to cinematographer Peter Stein. The POV is questionable considering that it makes it seem as if Jason can teleport. Now, I know the recent video game, people can now make the claim that this ability is canon, but for this film, I don't buy it. The effects were provided by Carl Fullerton after both Tom Savini and Stan Winston had to drop out due to prior commitments. Stan Winston doing the effects for a Friday the 13th film. We could only dream. The editing of Susan Cunningham preserves the effectiveness of the makeup effects. The film doesn't dwell on them, which is a big plus, so that way there we can't really see them stand out like they did in the first film. Manfredini, as always, provides a great music score. The cast works great with the material. Amy Steele is fantastic as Ginny. Steve Daskowitz as Jason makes for a believable villain for the screen time he has. Tom McBride as Mark is another standout. I thought Stu Charno as Ted was a surprise misdirection. Any pranksters or comedic characters are usually pegged to be killed in this series, but he manages to survive by staying in town. Overall, Friday the 13th Part 2 is a better foot forward than the previous Friday the 13th film. Better cast, the franchise signature killer is now center stage, and you have a strong female character that doesn't come off as pandering. This shows how much of a difference a seasoned filmmaker like Steve Miner as director makes when compared to a more business-oriented mind like Sean Cunningham in the chair. Thumbs up for this one.